Good evening and happy football Sunday. This is the Huddle Up podcast, Mile High Huddle podcast. Now you got me doing it, Zach. This is the Mile High Huddle podcast. We are live on YouTube, Twitch, and Twitter, but we're going to bring in our other Facebook groups real quick. So we're going to open it up, let it breathe like an open air stadium on a fall Sunday for Denver Broncos football. And welcome in, everybody. This is the Mile High Huddle podcast. I am sitting in for Chad Jensen. They like to call me the deacon next to your football priest. And this guy over here is one of the football priests. This is Zack Kelberman. Chad says you know him and you love him, but Zach, I'm not sure that's entirely true all the time. I think they know you, but you know what? I've always said loved, hated, but never ignored, right? How are you doing tonight, my friend?
I think that was one of the first things I said when Chad started doing that whole spiel, Scott, was they might know me, but not all of them love me. So it's kind of I'm a hit or miss commodity in Broncos country. But Scott, I'm so happy football's here. What a wild Sunday this has been. Obviously, your Falcons went down today, but we had that crazy Cincinnati-Pittsburgh game. The Colts tied. Aaron Rodgers got blown out. I mean, there's a ton of stuff going on today, and I'm so happy it's week one.
Yeah, Ernie Mays doesn't like to acknowledge the fact, one of our beloved community members does not like to acknowledge the fact that there are other teams in the NFL, or at least he doesn't like us to acknowledge that there's other teams in the NFL. But we'll talk a little bit about the game tomorrow night, mere 24 hours away, as you get the encore in the Monday night game against the Seattle Seahawks. First-year coaches and how they've done, 5-2-1 so far. And some of the injury reports, more questions than answers on the last injury report, but there is a definite that came in today, and we'll talk about that. And we'll talk about a little AFC West, of course, and then we'll hit the chat. What do you guys want to talk about? That's what we'll find out tonight. First, let's take care of some matters of business. PristineAuction.com is back with Mile High Huddle. PristineAuction.com is the most trusted sports memorabilia auction site with an A+ Better Business Bureau rating. We are teaming up with Pristine Auction once again on another great giveaway. Viewers can win a Peyton Manning signed framed photo. Check out our Twitter page for pics of this great piece of memorabilia. To win, all you have to do is head to pristineauction.com and click register on the top of the page, or just follow the link in the podcast description. When you register, use our registration code Elway. You should be able to remember that one to be entered. And as a bonus, Pristine Auction will kick in $10 off your first winning auction.
Yeah, guys, every item on pristineauction.com comes with a certificate of authenticity from the industry's most reputable authenticators. Upgrade your collection of signed memorabilia today and get $10 off your first item one when you use the code Elway when you sign up. Again, pristineauction.com/register or use the link in the show description. Remember to use the code Elway and get $10 off your first item one and be entered to win a Peyton Manning signed framed photo. The drawing will be held Monday, September 19th.
Yeah, thank you, Pristine Auction. Support the folks that help support the show. And let me take the chance here to remind everybody to hit that subscribe, like, and share button, especially the share button and like. We were at about 90 so as we get started. We should finish up around the neighborhood of 300. That helps with you hitting the likes and shares and kind of goosing those algo bots and let people know that we're here. So I guess the big news for the weekend was for Denver Broncos anyway, Zach, was that linebacker Josey Jewell was ruled out. One of the last press conferences, there were a lot of questionables and a doubtful. That doubtful has been downgraded to out. What were your initial impressions when you heard that Jewell was not going to be playing?
I mean, I don't want to talk too much about Jewell I've seen some comments like he's made of glass, he sucks. It's just another unfortunate injury for Josey, and I hope it doesn't linger because calves are tough to rehab and tough to come back from, and he's the Broncos inside linebacker one. But that was my bigger thought initially was, again, look where the Broncos are when one above average, and I'm being kind, starter goes down, they're left with duct tape and bubble wrap at the position. And after years of ignoring it, Scott, we all wanted Roquan Smith, but the underscored point there is that they neglected the position, haven't had free agent resources dumped into it, haven't spent a draft pick worth a lick at inside linebacker. And now the Broncos are down to, let's see, Jonas Griffith coming off a dislocated elbow, Alex Singleton, I know, and Justin Sternad. God help the Broncos if that's how it lasts.
Yeah, let's take the chance here. Not everybody wanted Roquan Smith, just because this is a chance to shout out our good friend of the show, Ethan, the DWI guys over in London. He'll probably check us out in the morning. This is a chance to say that Ethan was pounding the table for Chad Muma. It's almost like a reflex. Do I look fat in this? No. Is she prettier than me? No. Who should we have taken in the third round? Muma. It's just one of those reflex things. So shout out to Ethan, who's been banging that drum for an inside linebacker pretty much, since I've known him. And speaking of banging that drum, Phil McLaughlin comes in with some stars, breaking the ice for us on Facebook. He says, "Good evening, Zack and Scott. Got to admit, KC looked good today. I'm actually glad we are playing them later in the season. Let's ride MHH for life." The reports of their demise have been greatly exaggerated. They still have Patrick Mahomes. They still have Andy Reid. And as I'm watching Patrick Mahomes with a scout's eye, he's one of those guys. It's like, I don't watch him play. Just if you're a quarterback, don't look at him and say, "Oh, that's how I want to do it," because he does stuff that just nobody else does. I know for a neutral fan of the game, he's really, really fun to watch. I mean, I know that's going to sound, terrible on this podcast, but I am a fan of the game. That's why I'm here. That's how I've gotten here. And he's fun to watch do some of the things that are just so unorthodox. Backstep fades. He's shooting 3-pointers into the corner of the end zone and dropping them in, dropping dimes in. Shovel passes underhanded, not the side flip. We've seen the sidearm stuff. He's really good. And Zack, Tyreek Hill was really good for the Dolphins too. So, Tyreek Hill is a good player. It wasn't just one making the other look good. They're both really good. And the Chiefs are going to be a handful this year.
Yeah, you said exactly perfectly how I feel about Mahomes in Kansas City. I mean, Broncos fans can hate them all they want, but they have to recognize a great quarterback when one comes around. Unfortunately, he plays for Kansas City, but Patrick Mahomes, you mentioned the basketball analogy there. He might not be MJ, but I think he's Steph Curry. Just what he does at the position, how unique and transformative and transcendent he is. Boy, is he a lot of fun to watch. And anyone, that's why on these podcasts, Scott, Chad, you, me, we all predicted the Chiefs record. And a lot of people were saying, 9-8 or 10-7. No, they're going to be a higher win team than most people realize. And it could be where they just run away with the AFC West once again. But I will say, I don't think this was a huge barometer for the Chiefs because they were playing a Cardinals team that just had no one on offense. And I think they still have VJ as their DC, and that defense was completely overwhelmed. I believe Kansas City plays the Chargers in week 2, and that'll be much more of a litmus test as to where the West stands going forward.
Man, the Chargers open up their season with 2, back-to-back. And then with 3, because then they've got Broncos. No, week 3 is 49ers. Right. So, but I feel like the Raiders or Chargers are coming up pretty quick. And no, this is the season to overreact. Week 1 is overreaction central. It's not an overreaction to say that Patrick Mahomes is really good. Is he going to throw for 17 times 5? Is he going to throw for 85 touchdowns? No, he's not. He's not always going to be as good as he was today. That's unsustainable. But he's really good. And the Chiefs are a really good football team. And, I think to a man, everybody at MHH and woman, if you asked, who's the favorite for this division, I don't remember hearing anybody saying anybody other than the Kansas City Chiefs, and I haven't seen anything to change my mind yet.
A lot of people thought it was going to be the Tyreek Hill, it was going to kill the offense, but most people don't realize they added 3 receivers to make up for 1 Tyreek Hill, and all the receivers they added kind of just fit that Kansas City identity in their offense. And when you have a future Hall of Fame coach, a future Hall of Fame quarterback, you have Travis Kelce on offense still, you're going to be fine. So they're not going to be taken lightly, and the Broncos will have their hands full later in the year.
Garth Knight coming in on YouTube. He says, MHH country, let's ride. Scott, I know Matt Ryan was pretty good for a decade, but I haven't seen him pass above 25 yards effectively for a spell. Your thoughts? By the way, Jewel News is a bummer. My thoughts on that is a lot around the team itself. The last 2 seasons, he was basically without Julio Jones. He threw a bunch. He's actually pretty accurate. If you look at advanced metrics, he's actually pretty accurate on the deep ball when he gets the time to throw one. He had the least amount of time. He's been sacked 85 times, 125 times the last 3 years, 85 the last 3. He's just gotten the hell beat out of him playing for Atlanta. Got off to a slow start with the Colts today. I think that for a team that has playoff aspirations to go in and get a tie, and get outplayed by Houston, that game's starting to look better on the schedule for the Denver Broncos. I think they will be better. They will play better, but it wasn't a really fast start for the Colts. So, and yeah, the Jewell news is a bummer. I mean, again, last year was a big injury. TJ Watt, let's think about him. He had the same thing happen today, torn pectoral. They haven't done an MRI, but that's what they think. And frankly, Zack, I think I've told you my brother-in-law is a doctor, physical therapist type rehabilitation specialist. And he says that's just kind of a gross injury because it tears and then it looks like you got hit with a baseball bat and it just pulls and drains down your side.
Football and stuff.
Yeah, the bruise and stuff. So I got to, if they're talking torn pectoral, they pretty much know they're not going to need it. So that's a bummer for him, and it's a bummer for Jewell. I mentioned Watt because that happened today. Jewell happened last year, and you're thinking, okay, he's back. And again, are you starting to get the injury prone label, or is this just a rough game? I mean, it is a rough game, but a lot of guys play 16, 17 games a year.
Yeah, it is a bummer for Jewell, and my God, what a bummer for TJ Watt. He was literally destroying that game. The Steelers' defense was remarkable today against Joe Burrow, and TJ Watt was a huge reason why. So that's definitely best defensive player in football for my money, even over Aaron Donald. He is that impactful. Definitely sucks for him. And I think you and I disagree a little bit on Matt Ryan, Scott. I was a huge fan of him back in his prime, but now I feel the W word, washed, can be associated with Matt Ryan when you have a better team around you. And it was at Indy, I think the game was today, right? And you're tying.
No, it was in Houston.
Was it in Houston? I thought I saw a dome. So when you're still tying, though, when you can't beat Davis Mills, Lovie Smith, and you're tying with them, even though Chad, the kicker for the Colts, I forgot his name was, Blankenship.
No, that's Rodrigo. He was a Georgia boy with the specs. So he kicked in goggles that looked a lot like these.
Yeah, he needs better goggles because he missed that chip shot. But yeah, it was a tough week one game. But like you said, it's the season for overreacting, and there's a lot of football left to be played.
Yeah, I mean, he drove him down there, passed well. The numbers are good, but he's got to get a little bit more aggressive pushing the ball downfield. And again, for me, it's hard. It's hard for me to say I can't get a read on Matt Ryan because everything else around him was so crap. I said, wait. The refrigerator's not cold enough. Well, how do you know it's not cooling well enough? The power's out. I don't know. I can't tell you if it's going to be cold enough because there's no power to it. The power is the problem, not the refrigerator. So again, we'll see. First game out. His number 2 receiver is going to be a rookie. Michael Pittman is his number 1 receiver and played like it today. This is some fantasy talk for everybody. Michael Pittman's a beast and had big numbers today, and so did Jonathan Taylor. And Big E came in and said pretty much exactly what you did. He was just wrecking that game before he got hurt. Someone asked, it's in here somewhere, how concerned, and maybe Jesse coming in here on Facebook, he says, how concerned should we be about Josey's injury? Calves aren't quite as scary as hamstrings. So they don't linger quite as bad, but if you don't get off it and take care of it, it can be a recurring injury. So if he was close this week, I would think he should be a full go pretty soon. Hamstrings are they're voodoo. Hamstrings are the voodoo of injuries. You just don't know. Someone's there with a freaking pin and a Cupid doll jamming you in the back of the leg. You're like, I thought I was okay. Sometimes a clean break is what you want. Oh, I broke an ankle. Okay, 6 weeks, she'll be good to go. Done. So the calf shouldn't be too problematic. Shouldn't be. Not that I'm a doctor, and I always love it when they say, well, we hate to speculate, but we're gonna anyway. It should be okay in the long term, and he is crucial to this defense in stopping the run game.
My thing with with any injury-prone player, and I guess we'll use that descriptor for Josey Jewell, it's like a hangnail could linger for them. You never really know how they're going to respond to therapy and rehab and everything and when they'll be back. But hopefully in Jewell's case, it's a 1-week injury. And my thing is this. If you need Josey Jewell to beat the Seahawks, you might have a bigger problem. If there's a game where they can get by Seattle, Scott, without Josey Jewell, they still have Griffith. Singleton looked okay. They're high on Sternad, and inside linebacker is such a de-emphasized position in this Broncos defense. Maybe kick Baron Browning over to inside linebacker for a few snaps, but you shouldn't need Josey. Let him get healthy. Heck, give him week 2 to get healthy. You can take down Houston without Josey Jewell. Bring him back for week 3, 100%, and let's go forward.
Yeah, I don't think this is the ground and pound of, the Legion of Boom teams where they could just beat you up the middle. The weakness of the Seattle team, and there's plenty of them, but it kind of lines up with the weaknesses of what we think are of the Denver Broncos. How tough are the Broncos going to be right up the gut of the defense? Well, the Seahawks aren't great right up the middle. Okay, well, that favors the Broncos, and it favors this matchup and getting him healthy. And Lawrence comes in with some stars. Thank you, Lawrence. He says that Mack and Bosa edge is going to be a pain. Yes, it is. It's one of my notes when we're talking about other games. Look for them to be a force, especially in the end of games like today. It reminds me of Ware and Vaughn. Do you remember Ware and Vaughn? They had one season together, didn't they, Zach?
Yeah, I mean, it was a fairly short-lived duo, but it does look like it's going to be an issue for any team. I mean, not just for the Broncos. That was the whole point of what the Chargers did, going out and getting Khalil Mack. All we can do, Scott, is hope that Garrett Bowles and Billy Turner are up to the task on the edges, and Russell Wilson has enough time.
Gary Lees Palmer says, hey, Zach and Scott, a lot of teams need kickers. Go Broncos and let's ride. I don't consider kickers football players, but I get asked all the time, what do you think's the hardest position to scout? It would be kickers, because a big leg doesn't really mean anything. There's thousands of people that can kick a 50-yard field goal. Thousands, literally. It's not physically that hard to do. So it's completely 100% mental in order to pull that off. It's like knocking in a 3-foot putt. Everybody can do it. Can you do it at the Masters with, the Masters on the line and all those people doing? I wouldn't. I'd probably pass out. So it's tough. Lots of guys need kickers. Well, it's nice not to be one of those teams, right, Denver Broncos? And Gary, thank you for the stars and being such a huge friend of the show.
What you said, Scott, is so true. Anyone can kick a 50-yard field goal, or not anyone, but a lot of people can. But consistency. Can you nail that kick with the clock running down, people rushing at you, all the pressure on you? Can you do it over a course of a season or multiple years? In the case of Justin Tucker, Brandon McManus, McPherson from Cincinnati, his name was Money McPherson for a reason during last year's postseason. He was that automatic. He was that clutch, but sometimes it doesn't go your way. Sometimes you have a meltdown, and you have to be appreciative for the teams like the Broncos who don't really have those issues.
And Garth Knight comes in. He says, again, appreciate you, Garth. I'm glad Pat McAfee's time got Matt Ryan with all their Russ hate. They deserve him. They think Matt Ryan is a Navy SEAL, maybe in the Village people. Yeah, YMCA. I just see some of the stuff, and they speak well of Matt Ryan, but I hadn't seen them talk badly. But again, I see what comes across my Twitter feed every so often. I don't listen to those things. I like Pat McAfee well enough, though. He seems like an intelligent, not even well-spoken, but, honest. I guess that's the big one for me, is he gives honest takes. So has there been a lot of Russell Wilson, Denver Broncos hate on the Pat McAfee show? I hadn't heard that before.
I haven't heard that either. I really, it would stick with me, I feel like, if Pat McAfee were to, somehow start dogging Russell Wilson, but that's Indianapolis's problem. Matt Ryan, whatever happens there, that's the Colts. That's on them. I'll tell you, though, for the what is it, week 4, week 5, whenever the Broncos play, I am not shaking in my boots to take on this Colts team after watching 1 week of football. You take away Jonathan Taylor and make Matt Ryan beat you, I like the Broncos' chances. Call me crazy.
Well, taking away Jonathan Taylor is easier said than done. However, would they rush him today? About 40 times? The game goes to overtime. Let me see here. Let me scroll down. Hit that box score, 31 carries for 161 yards. That's unsustainable. He had just a little, maybe 330 last year, which led the league by a decent distance. And, 30 carries times 17. Yeah, that's 510. Stop making me do math, Zach. That's unsustainable. So they're going to have to find other ways to do it. But they had the ball a lot because, then Matt Ryan throws the ball 50 times. So, you're there were a ton of plays. I think the Broncos ran 50 plays in the last game of the season. Those two had 80 together. So should be they'll get better. They'll get better. First game out there together. Andrew Baker. What's up, Zack and Scott and fam? That's all y'all. We waited this long. We can wait another day. I hope they do boo Russ. Peyton got cheered and lost. I would expect the opponent to get booed to a certain extent. I don't know. I mean, it's football. It's a little bit of a different crowd. I've seen it in baseball. Baseball's not quite as emotional because there's 162 freaking games. And when a guy comes back, you cheer him. You cheer him when he comes back for the most part. If they were good servants to the club, and I don't think anybody can say Russell Wilson was anything but. They might not like how it ended, but they're want to believe the stories they are being told that makes them feel better about the team they still support. But at the end of the day, they'll see how Russell Wilson handled himself, which was pure class, and they'll remember that. And he has nothing but good things to say. They might boo him, but when it's all said and done, they'll embrace him afterwards. When he's not playing against them anymore, they will remember Russell Wilson fondly and appreciate the stars, Andrew.
When you have the head coach pretty much encouraging the fan base to boo the opposing player, I'd be shocked if we don't hear a smattering of boos. But like Scott said, let's assume the Broncos do end up victorious in this game. When he's having his post-game press conference, for example, getting an interview, I can see Seahawks fans making their way down and to the lower level of the stadium, and they'll stick around and cheer Russell Wilson for what he did do because it's unignorable. It might have ended, the marriage wasn't ended peacefully, but you can't ignore what he did in Seattle, what he brought to the city, what he meant for the franchise, and how good of a quarterback he really is. So hopefully there's more level-headed Seahawks fans in real life than there are in social media, because by God are they salty. Hold this L, though.
Yeah, I remember way back in the day, you might remember Jeff George. He was not the epitome of class, and he came back after playing with the Falcons and won. When he was I don't even remember who he was playing for because Jeff George was fairly forgettable, and so were the Falcons. But he did a point at the crowd victory lap after the game.
That's my kind of guy.
After the game, I'm like, dude, this is Atlanta. You'd be lucky you don't get shot. But it's like you're not going to expect that from Russell Wilson, for goodness sakes. It's going to be very. Win or lose, he's going to be super gracious. He's very, very polished. That Russell Wilson image is spot on, and it's because it's genuine. I kind of think, Zach, sometimes we're talking about him, I think of the movie, Tin Cup. You're like, when the cameras aren't there, he hates dogs, he hates kids, he hates old people. And then Don Johnson comes on. It's like, can't you see I'm working here? Do I bother you at work? What an ugly dog. I'm like, is that the moment we're going to get Russ? Is that really Russell Wilson?
Maybe.
No, Russell Wilson, I think, is pretty genuine.
When you mentioned Jeff George, I had to think, was that the quarterback, and I know it's not now, that knocked himself out by celebrating, hitting his head on? That was Kerry Collins.
No, I think that was Gus Frerotte, wasn't it?
Oh, was it Gus Frerotte?
I think it was Gus Frerotte. Or Gus Frerotte took the job of whichever idiot ran into. It was with Washington, I believe. Scores a touchdown, headbutts a concrete wall, and concusses and jams his neck. I think Gus Frerotte may have taken the job of whichever person did that. Someone in the chat can help us out. That was a long time ago. That wasn't Jeff George, though. Jeff George was Nuke LaLoosh, $1 million arm and 10-cent head. Just beautiful, beautiful passes. Throw for a zillion. It was Gus. Okay. Throw a beautiful pass. Number 1 overall pick. But just kind of an idiot.
It was an interesting generation of quarterbacks. Yeah, Gus Frerotte, good old Gus. He'll never
think that's we're talking about the 90s there. Who was the big name goofball in the mid 80s? It's Jim McMahon.
Yeah.
You're you can't all be Joe Cool and Joe Montana and John Elway. So, you got the anti-hero and Jim McMahon. We're getting way off track today. So, having some fun with this one. But I said earlier, that new coaches are 5-2-1, and can Hackett keep that going tomorrow and continue the trend? I think the magic 8 ball, if you shake it up, it says it looks probable. It's looking good.
As I wrote in the roundtable article for MHH, it might be a case where the fireworks that y'all are expecting, we're all hoping for, they might not materialize in the first quarter, second quarter, the first half. It might take until the fourth quarter before the offense find its rhythm. Hell, it might be where the Broncos don't find the rhythm in game one at all, and they have to do that going forward. I think it could be the defense just dominates Geno Smith, the Seahawks offense. Scott, I don't see a way, level playing field, all things being equal, the Broncos lose this, barring a major injury or just the Seahawks playing out of their minds. The Broncos are just a better team, and they're fueled by that criticism. Russ is fueled by that hit piece. He's fueled by that return to Seattle. I mean, unless Rashad Penny runs for like 300 yards and 5 touchdowns, it's hard for me to pick Seattle in this game.
You talk about, it's like, okay, what's the scary thought of the Denver Broncos offense right now? Okay, right tackle. All right. Well, your tackle situations are in better situation than Seattle's are right now. In theory, you're talking about 2 rookies out there, depending on who's playing. But if it's Abe Lucas and Charles Cross, you got 2 rookies going out there. Your interior line hasn't been great. Your quarterback is a journeyman backup at best. And you got 2 good receivers, really good receivers. But as we talked about, what good are receivers if you can't get them the ball? And then on the defensive side of the ball, it's a team that gave away, 3 first-round draft picks for a safety, and in the box safety. They're not a great. It's not a great roster. It's not a great roster, and I'm not 100% sure this team is, giving it all. I'm not saying they're not, but there comes a time where you start tuning out the message from the head coach, and you need a change for change's sake. If you're not having success, does this team say, we're 1 season away from getting a new coach, and they're just kind of mailing it in, so to speak? Pete Carroll's pretty good motivator and all, but his days are numbered.
I think they know that too. It was either Pete Carroll.
That's what I mean. It's hard. It's hard to give everything that it takes in this game with fine margins when you're playing for a guy whose days are numbered.
And you're playing for a guy, I think, who's coaching in the wrong decade. And does that sound familiar? Because it should. It sounds like Vic Fangio, an older, stubborn coach. Even though he's a better motivator, he still wants to win games, ground and pound, win games 13-10, play not to lose. That's not the Broncos style of football. Though I will agree with Todd Ostendorf here. If the Broncos win 21-17, I'm good with that. It might be closer to a lower score game than it would be. I don't see a 40-0 blowout, Scott. I don't know about you. It could be a defensive struggle early on. The Broncos defense should just put the clamps on Geno and the Seahawks offense. Russell Wilson could throw for 2 touchdowns, 3 touchdowns. He could have no touchdowns. But I think the offense, as the game goes on, will find its rhythm. And the Broncos, most importantly, will come out with a W.
You see a lot of these games, and they come down to the second half like that, is that the better team eventually grinds it out. The team with a little bit better depth and the better roster eventually finds a way to win. This isn't baseball, where the worst team wins 60 games and the best team loses 60 games. This is football where there's a huge disparity with a team that'll go 1-16 and one that could go 15-2. Where it's a physical game, and bigger, faster, and stronger is usually the winning team over the course. So you look at, and I bring this up because it's like, you look at some of these scores today and how it works, especially in week 1. You're like, okay, Saints, Falcons. Falcons had the Saints, by the cojones, and they're just not good enough. Besides that, they're the Falcons. Blowing leads is what they do, but they've got 0 depth, and the better team eventually wore them down in the second half and outscored them and won. Eagles, Lions. The Eagle. It was 7-0 Lions after 1, and then the better team comes around. Jets, Ravens, Jets, 10-3 at halftime. Then the better team comes along. 14-3, Washington over the Jaguars. The Jaguars are terrible. better team again. Browns, Panthers. I could go on. I won't. You're probably getting bored. But again, the better team usually distances themselves in the second half. And you can do Kelberman's corner at halftime, and everybody can be losing their mind because it's 7-6.
That'll be what happens too. I can already see it. You get rid of Russell Wilson. Fire Nathaniel Hackett. Pete Carroll was right. Yada yada.
We can't move the ball. We can't. They're dropping pass. It happens. I mean, my gut tells me that the second half of games or the scoring is like 50% higher. That's just the way it seems a lot. I mean, going down and scoring early, it's just teams have like a feeling out period where the defenses can run on adrenaline and emotion for a quarter, and then it comes down to the better team usually, and they take them down.
And there are outliers as well, like the Giants taking down Tennessee today and the Vikings taking down the Packers. But, that stuff is immaterial to the Broncos. The Broncos have to go out there tomorrow night and play their brand of football. They are the better team. And if they're as good as we all think they are, it'll come out in the final score.
I'm not convinced that it is an outlier, Minnesota being Green Bay. I'm just not. Nick and I had that discussion last week. It may have been Big E, but somebody asked, Seattle's run offense is legit. We'll see. What are the good teams, the teams that are projected to be good that you think could be bad? We both said Cincinnati Bengals because their offensive line is horrendous, and they weren't that good last year. They were 10-7 and eked into the playoffs and got hot. But they weren't a good team, over the course of the longer haul. And for me, the Green Bay Packers, Aaron Rodgers' two leading wide receivers this year were both rookies. Second round pick and like a fifth round pick. Nick's loves the defense, and I was like, okay, defense and running game. I love that. But again, I look at the losses that the Packers had, and they couldn't score any points. Like, how did they get better? You can't just throw a good defense out there and then expect your 40-year-old quarterback to keep pulling rabbits out of his hat. It's one of the reasons he's been upset. You're not helping me win. So if you're not going to help me get players, at least give me all the money. So that seems to be the new way. Well, you're not drafting players for me. Give me $50 million. Okay. That worked.
It is true that, Rodgers really has no one to throw to now. When Christian Watson's your number one receiver, I think you have a problem. I just didn't expect Minnesota to win by 3 touchdowns today. It was a dominant performance, and it kind of caught me off guard. But credit to Kevin O'Connell.
All this new, we're going to put, 5 people in the box. And, I know it's a passing league, but it was 20-7. I turned that on at the end and turned it on in the fourth quarter. It's 20-7. Minnesota's got the ball. Green Bay's got 6 guys in the box. Minnesota just, okay, well, hell, we'll just run it. Ran it right down, ran 5 or 6 minutes off the clock and kicked a field goal. It's not rocket science.
Helps having Dalvin Cook as well.
They close the practices. Media, get out of here. We're only for 30 minutes. Man, it ain't rocket science. It's not. You put 6 guys in the box while I'm trying to kill the clock. I'm going to run it down your damn throat.
That's right.
They did. Anyway. Let's see. Lawrence is coming with some stars. He says, hey, guys, I heard Manny got told, why did he keep running in the red zone by 6th graders on his son's team? That kind of humbled him since they lost. What I'm getting at is these video game kids have a bigger understanding of the game as played nowadays. Should we be looking to somehow capitalize on that? To a certain extent, yes. And I once saw an offensive coordinator that was so bad, I said, you give me the online rankings of the 10 best guys playing Madden, and I'll let him call plays over that son of a that we've got now.
Yeah, you watched Pat Shurmur last year. You go pick out a random 2nd grader from your local elementary school. He's a better play caller than Pat Shurmur. But I don't think, Lawrence, we have to turn over that rock quite yet. We don't have to go that far outside the box as scouting Madden players and people on Xbox all day. They are professionals for a reason, the coaches in the NFL, and Peyton Manning is one of the greatest quarterbacks of all time. I think it's more just a funny that his son's teammates said, more so than any sort of analytic advantage they can have.
Yeah, I came up with a phrase as I watched these same old recycled coaches who are terrible at their job is, just because you have a job doesn't mean you're qualified for it. It's like, oh, what do you know? You're not a coach. I know this guy's an idiot. That's what I know. That's what I know. There's like a million coaches. I have to be smarter than at least one of them. At least just one.
Pat Shurmur. I'm not getting off this. I'm not. I won't ever.
No, and I again, there's other smart people on the other side of the ball trying to stop you as well. Joseph comes in. He says, "Where's Philip Lindsay? Is on a team. He got re-signed by the Colts for their practice squad.
Yeah.
So he is there. And Andrew Baker coming back in with some stars. He said, I thought the 49ers might be our first loss, but losing against the Bears, that should be a great game and a great meet and greet. Yes, it is. I think both of us are planning on being at the meet and greet. Yeah, Zach?
Yes, sir.
Okay, well, good. So we'll be there. And again, who was the quarterback last year, the rookie quarterback that got all the accolades that everybody was gushing about? Top 100 this, player of the year that, and was very, very mediocre, but mediocre for a first-year quarterback is actually pretty good. Do you remember the name of this person?
Davis Mills or Mac Jones?
It was Mac Jones. It was Mac Jones. Playing quarterback in this league is freaking hard. And making your first start is hard. Trey Lance goes out there, and it's an interesting call for me to do this, what they've done. Now, they brought Jimmy G back, but in San Francisco, don't you consider yourselves a contender, a Super Bowl contender? Oh, yeah. And again, it is a 17-game season. You can go 3-4, and you're not necessarily a rookie after 3 months in the league, if you throw a bye week in there, and get it going again, but that was such a huge risk when you're doing well, and especially to give up as much as they did. And to see that Trey Lance might struggle just a little bit, that shouldn't surprise anybody. It really shouldn't. I mean, the guy played at North Dakota State, North Dakota or something. What level of football has he seen that is anything close, except practice, to what he saw against what most consider a bad Bears team? That's still the best defense he's ever seen, ever, by far.
Yeah, he got drafted, then he sat a year, and then he played the Bears today in the pouring, driving rain, no less. So that made it another challenge for him. I thought both quarterbacks, Fields included, were really mediocre. I really wasn't impressed by either of them, and maybe, just maybe, that Week 3 matchup against the 49ers will be a little easier for the Broncos. But hey, Scott, do you remember when the Broncos passed on Justin Fields and Mac Jones and every quarterback, and then they got Patrick Surtain instead, and then they traded for Russell Wilson on top of that? Those were good times, weren't they?
That's what do we say? That's the long game. You still needed a quarterback. Don't make no mistake about that. But the long game is, okay, well, Justin Fields isn't going to help us this year. We can get a corner. We don't necessarily like Justin Fields, and I've got my eye on another quarterback. Again, I always you go back and you grade things in hindsight. What happened at the time? Well, why'd you waive that guy? Off your 53, you want him. Oh, because we're putting this guy on we're going to sign him tomorrow. Oh, okay. That makes sense. Why didn't you take a quarterback at 9 in a decent quarterback class? Because we're going to put together a package and we're going to go get a guy, and then we want this cornerback. Okay, well, that makes sense. It's just, in the instant gratification, Twitter folks, podcast folks like us, we're not playing the long game. We don't play the long game as well as a general manager. And that was one of the things, Zach, that I tried to talk to Nick about when I said Pat Surtain should be your guy at corner. Like, I don't know if he fits the scheme. No. Throw scheme out the freaking window. Scheme is coach dependent, and coaches last 1 or 2 years. Yep. You got to think like a general manager. General manager's thinking for the next 10 years. Who's the better overall player? Forget the scheme. Because the scheme's going to change. The players are going to stay the same, and they better be scheme independent.
That's exactly, you stole it the last second, the word I wanted to use about a generational talent. And I do think Patrick Surtain II is a generational talent. And those guys, no matter what scheme, zone, man, press, off coverage, they're going to win because they're that good. And I see that Joe Brewer said hindsight is 2020 in response to what I just said. Joe, I don't do this as much anymore, but I got to give myself some credit. I was so happy. I was among the very few that was so happy the Broncos passed on Fields, passed on Mac Jones, because they got the next champ Bailey at cornerback. The only thing in hindsight, we didn't know a year later they'd pull off the trade for Russell Wilson, but we did know in George Paton's hands, the Broncos are off to a very good start.
Well, and part of that is you have to remember, and Zach, try not to get too angry when I say this, Zack wanted Drew Lock. So he didn't want another quarterback. He didn't want a rookie quarterback coming in. Drew Lock can do this. Give him a chance. Let him go. I'm serious about this now.
Yeah, I know.
Him and Chad were all about throw Drew Lock in there. He can get it done. So they didn't want a quarterback, which makes sense. I'm a little more skeptical. And Zach says, I think you're rubbing off on Scott. Good on you guys. And, we can learn from each other for sure. So you can teach old dogs new tricks. Just takes a little longer. That's all.
Tend to think alike, though, on most things. We see things the same way. I feel like so.
But no, the first pod I ever came on, I said, I sent, he said, you want to come talk draft with us? Chad did. I said, okay, what are your needs? And he was like, cornerback. He said something else. And then he finished with cornerback. I'm like, all right, well, you want Pat Surtain. That's your guy. It's the best cornerback in this draft for sure. And the other phrase that I hope you all have learned is it's not the players that you miss that kill you. Okay. If Justin Fields turns out to be really good, that's not what hurts you. What hurts you is players you take that can't play. If you keep taking good players, you'll be fine. You'll be fine. Pat Surtain was not going to hurt your team. He was going to make your team better, even if he wasn't the quarterback you needed right then. It's a long game. Pat Surtain's young, super young. He didn't come out here as double holdback, 28-year-old rookie. He's going to be here a long time. That's a good pick, even if it's not quite the pick you wanted. We need a quarterback. You'll get one. You hope. But, I'll tell you what, Zach, we just talked about all these rookies in the league. Would you feel better right now, with a second-year Trey Lance, or you feel like your chances are better with Russell Wilson? Duh, I know the answer to that. It's kind of rhetorical.
Yeah, I think just a little bit better with Russell, but I'm still have high hopes for Trey Lance. I liked him a lot coming out of college. I thought he'd be the best of that bunch, but we'll see. He's such a raw quarterback. He needs probably another year or so to really reach his potential. You're right. I did want Drew Lock last year in 2021, but this year I was resigning myself to, okay, Drew Lock, because Aaron Rodgers wasn't working out, and I literally tweeted, okay, Drew Lock and Malik Willis it is then. And then 5 minutes later, they traded for Russell Wilson. So I ate crow heavily with that, but I came around on Lock, and I wanted a younger, higher upside quarterback in the picture, and that wasn't going to be Lock this season, regardless of who.
Yeah. So again, this was a year ago. This was more than a year ago. This is a year and a half ago when we're talking about So when Zack says I was happy with the Surtain pick, I believe him for that reason. For that reason alone, because he's a good player, and I know he wasn't going to be high on taking a quarterback in that spot.
It was more about Fields to me than it was Drew Lock. I'm not, and I wasn't a big believer in Fields. I wasn't getting on that hype train like so many others were, but I might be wrong.
I was, and it might be my bias because Trevor Lawrence was number one for me, and Justin Fields was number two. Those are two of my Georgia boys, but I loved Justin Fields' toughness. When James Skalski about cut him in half, and then he goes and rips the ball 65 yards downfield in a college football playoff game. Yeah. I'm like, man, this kid's got it. He's For just sure. got it. So I wanted the Falcons to take him at 4. And for knowing that the Denver Broncos, it still seemed to me like you needed a franchise quarterback. I did want the Broncos to take him at 9, but I certainly never poo-pooed the pick of Pat Surtain. I wasn't one of those guys. Now I've poo-pooed taking a tight end and a wide receiver for the Atlanta Falcons for a team that can't run, stop the run, block, pass, or do anything. I think it's stupid. Just like I said about the Seattle Seahawks. What good is having your two best players being wide receivers if the rest of your team on offense is subpar? Okay, I've got good skill players, but my offensive line isn't very good. And to be fair, the Seattle Seahawks are in the process of rebuilding and are investing in the offensive line. But it is a rebuilding team. This isn't a ready-made playoff team right now.
How about trading for a young quarterback and not starting him? I mean, I just can't fathom what the Seahawks are seeing in Geno that makes them believe. Even a diluted
They didn't trade for him.
that
They
they could
didn't.
contend. He was a
They
throw-in,
traded
I
for
know,
they
but like
traded
at
for 3
least
first-round draft. They traded for 5 draft picks. That's what they traded for.
justify the trade, though, man. I mean, Geno Smith's not going to get anyone excited, and they'll learn that tomorrow night when the Boo Birds will come out, and not for Russell Wilson, but for their own quarterback, Geno Smith. That I guarantee you.
Yeah, I just again, that was kind of a throw. And I feel like, Locke was like, okay, we need somebody else in here. I don't think that Locke was a tipping point of that trade. Getting Noah Fant was solid. Getting Shelby Harris was a pretty big piece, but it was really about all those draft picks. I got 2 starters, a possible starter, and 5 picks. Again, for what you needed as Denver Broncos, it feels like this was a good deal for us. This was a good deal. We got a guy for the next 10 years that can play quarterback. That's what we needed. For what the Seattle Seahawks needed, which was they had a want-away quarterback with 2 years left on his deal and a decaying roster. They got a good return. They're thinking this is a good deal. And if both of you are coming away feeling that way, it was a good trade. It was a good trade for all of you. Now it depends on what you do with those picks, and that's kind of the problem about trading for draft picks. Draft picks are uncertain. Getting a 9-time Pro Bowler has a lot more, certainty to it, but that's why it's so expensive, Zach. Which is one of the reasons when you got a chance to take a QB high, it's a pretty good idea to get one because, God, it's expensive to get into the top 5. Ask San Francisco. Damn, it's expensive to trade for an established veteran, as you well know.
I was going to say, I agree with you. The draft compensation was always the crucial component, but then they turn around, Scott, and use some of that compensation on 2 offensive tackles. So you trade away your franchise quarterback who was so sick of being hit and battered and sacked, and then you go out and get 2 edge protectors. It's like when they take 1 step forward, the Seahawks are taking 2 backward, but not our problem.
Again, talking about the Seahawks, though, that's a rebuild, though. You get your foundational tackles. Now I can block. Now I can go next year. I can get my quarterback and build them together instead of dropping Trevor Lawrence behind an offensive line. Because that's one of the scary things when you're drafting that high is, am I going to get this guy shell-shocked? The teams that are drafting that high are bad teams. So you're sending a rookie quarterback to a crap team, and you're surprised when he doesn't do well in his first year? This class is a bunch of busts. Maybe. But I'm certainly not going to say that after 1 year when you're playing for the Jacksonville Jaguars and Chicago Bears, for God's sake.
I just think it shows the pettiness and the vindictiveness of the Seahawks and how that relationship really went south fast because you trade away Russ and then after what he said in the criticism he leveled upon the Seahawks for not protecting him, then you go out and use 2 of the draft picks you got for him on linemen to block his successor at quarterback. So again, that whatever they want to do in Seattle, that's on Pete Carroll and John Schneider. I feel really confident about Nathaniel Hackett, Russell Wilson, and George Paton, and we won't have to worry about this or talk about this much longer. It won't be in theory for much longer, Scott. We have less than 24 hours until this all comes to an end, the game's played, and we'll go from there.
All right, before we get out of here, running up on 50 minutes here, and I'm sure there's a lot of people that are already watching some more football and want to get to it, but this is the last time I'm going to see you until the gut reaction, and we can talk about this. So give me the 30-second version or more so on what to expect for tomorrow.
It might be a slower start offensively. They didn't play a snap in preseason. I don't think there's any correlation there as to the Broncos losing or winning this game or making the playoffs, but Russell Wilson and the offensive line, the receivers, they might need a quarter, 2 quarters, 3 quarters, whatever, to get going and find their footing. Fortunately, the defense should just apply a stranglehold, I think, on Geno Smith and the Seahawks rushing attack. They'll take care of Rashad Penny, who's going to get his yardage because they're going to give him the ball so often. He'll have probably 40 carries and he'll get some yards, but really nothing worthwhile. They'll make Geno Smith beat them, and spoiler alert, Geno Smith's not beating you, so they'll be fine on defense, and the offense will come back around in the second half. I have this game like a 26-19 victory thereabouts for the Broncos. A win's a win's a win. I don't see a blowout, though, and it's okay.
No, for 45 points, I believe that puts them at the over. I think it's right at 42-43. Real quick, want to hit Gary Lees Palmer says, we all supported Locke when he was our guy, but Gary Payton was saving us. Not Gary Payton. Gary Payton was a pretty good point guard, though. The glove. George Payton was saving his moves for after Vic. Yeah, you're not investing. What am I gonna? I'm gonna go to Vic Fangio and say, who do you? Let's work together on this draft. Whatever. Come on. He was dead man walking. When we came in here, the gut reaction on him getting fired was, I can't believe he was here this year at all. Honestly, what was he, 5-10 and 24 or something in 2 seasons? And you got a new general manager come in. I can't believe he was retained, honestly. So, and then just to clarify, after I said that, Luke, Broncos for breakfast will be tomorrow morning, but it's the last time we'll see Zack until the gut reaction. So I wanted to make sure we got his take. So Nick and I will be on Broncos for breakfast tomorrow at 9:30 Eastern, 7:30 Mountain, 6:30 a.m. Pacific. So bright and early. And if you want to hear me rag on the Falcons in the morning, you can hit my channel at 8:45 in the morning. That'll be fun. I won't be too harsh. They're too easy a target, man. It's like, beating up the small kid. There's just no glory in that. But I will talk about some of the good stuff, because again, my expectations were in the tank. That they even played the Saints within a point is a positive in my book. No, for me, I think of this like you said, and we've talked about. I expect a slow start. I really do. You haven't seen live bullets. Russell Wilson hasn't seen anybody but Broncos defensive backs in a year, which isn't necessarily a bad thing. The Broncos have some dang good defensive backs, but it's different when you're throwing at those defensive backs and there's someone coming at you that's not going to stop just because you're wearing a different colored jersey. So it is different. It'll be a different speed. Might take quarter and a half to get acclimated. But you know what? A good way to get acclimated is hand the ball off. Strength doesn't necessarily need time to sync up. Okay, there's a guy in front of me. I'm just going to blast him. That's pretty easy. There's not a whole lot of scheming there. So a early heavy dose of Javonte Williams and Melvin Gordon, kind of soften up, get an early lead, like a 10-3 at halftime, throw on 17 in the second half, and I'm thinking 27. What'd you say? I'm thinking like 27-16, somewhere in that neighborhood, 3 field goals and a touchdown if they move the ball that well. Sounds about right to me. Broncos cover, win handily. If it doesn't look like a blowout, it still might feel like a blowout. A much more disciplined team. You're not turning the ball over, knock on wood. Better special teams where you feel like you're always in control of the game, even if you don't necessarily run away for it. That's my prediction.
Yeah, it's a really good point about the running game, because not only does it take the pressure off Russell Wilson and not make him a sitting duck back there 45 times, it can make it from, 2nd and 10 on an incomplete pass, let's say, to 2nd and 3 when you have Javonte and Melvin Gordon. So that's a good point, Scott. I wouldn't be surprised if in the first half we see a lot more of the running game than we're all thinking.
All right, well, let me see here real quick. Always like to touch on our Twitch folks when they come in. So let's hit Savage Boy Kev, and we'll hit Robot of Doom. Or who was calling you Roboto F Doom? I don't remember who that was, Robot of Doom. I thought that was kind of funny, actually. So did you guys see the Raiders? Lots of turnovers, lots of pressure. Khalil Mack and Joey Bosa are going to be a fairly scary duo this year. You can't double them both and still get the ball down the field very well. And Robot of Doom says, I was dying when the Raiders lost. So is that the first? I don't remember the schedule. I feel like the Raiders are the first divisional game. Isn't that right?
In the entire NFL?
No. For the Broncos. For the Broncos.
Oh, on the Broncos schedule. I think
like week 4?
Week 4 or 5.
Week 4 at Vegas sound about right?
I think, yeah.
So, yeah. Okay. But on that note, I think it's about time to get us out of here, Zach.
All I want to say is Raiders is going to Raider. They're going to be that, feast or famine team, because Devontae Adams looked really good today. What do you have, like $161 and a touchdown? But Carr also threw 3 picks, forcing the ball to Devontae Adams because his other options were taken away. So credit to the Chargers.
For your freaking life too. I've said a zillion times, You talk about corner, you talk about edge. Give me the edge, man.
Yeah.
The best defensive back in the world is a quarterback on his hindquarters.
I think regardless, though, all these matchups in the West will be fun to watch. The Broncos, Chargers, Broncos, Raiders, Broncos, Chiefs. It's going to be a fun season. Can't wait to get into it starting tomorrow. But that was I thought it said MHI. That was the Mile High Huddle podcast. Follow us on Twitter at the MHH Pod. The main account on Twitter at Mile High Huddle, Scott at Scout Kennedy, myself at Kelberman NFL. If you guys want some swag, you guys know what it is, where it is, huddleuppod.com. Check that out when you get a hot second. And facebook.com/Mile High Huddle Pod. Like that page. Follow that page. Guys, if you haven't, please go to Apple Podcasts and leave your football priest and our deacon a 5-star review for a chance to win some merch each and every single month. But as you guys know, as you see ticking below you, if anything, subscribe, like, and share this video and every video you see on the MHH channel. It really helps us grow and reach more Broncos fans just like you. One more reminder, we're off the podcast. Scott, Chad, and I, whoever's potting with me tomorrow night, but Chad and I will be on the radio tomorrow afternoon if you want to check it out to get you ready for the game. 98.1 FM in Denver, milehighsports.com. Check that out, 2 o'clock tomorrow, every weekday from 2 to 3 Mountain. But Scott, before we get out of here, any last words heading into week 1 for the Broncos?
I want to say hey to Dean real quick, who came in with some stars. It feels like a new name, so thank you for that.
Welcome,
and then
Dean.
I guess the other thing is the "What have you done for me lately" crowd. We're talking about the Chiefs, this and that, and the team we didn't mention, they didn't even play that well, and they still beat the hell out of the Super Bowl champs, the Buffalo Bills.
Yeah.
They look kind of scary. They kind of toyed with the Rams.
Yeah.
I mean, 3 turnovers and you still win by 3 scores on the road. They're going to be fun to watch this year. Looking forward to a great season. Looking forward to Broncos for breakfast tomorrow. We'll see you in the morning. By God, next time we see you, it'll be game day.
Can't wait. Take care, guys. Have a great rest of your weekend. Enjoy the game tonight. And as always, go Broncos.